Welcome back to the Diaries of a Witch podcast. My name is Angelica, and I'm so excited about our guest today. So, we're going to be talking with George Lizos and, yeah, his book and everything regarding Greek mysticism and some Hellenic polytheism conversations. So, I'm just really excited to get to know you, George. Do you want to give a little introduction before we hop in?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, first of all. I'm so excited to be here and chat all about Greek mysticism and working with the Greek gods and goddesses in our practice. So, essentially, what I do, I'm a psychic healer, I'm a spiritual teacher. I write books about empowering light workers, witches, spiritual people to find and follow and fulfill their life purpose. Paganism came a little bit later in my path, although I started like somewhere in witchcraft. And then eventually my path led me to working with the Celtic gods and goddesses, and then eventually coming back to my roots and working with the Greek pantheon.
I love that. That's awesome. What were like your earliest magical origins? Like what was your childhood kind of like magical in any regard? How did you grow up in terms of your religious background?
So I grew up in a small island in Europe called Cyprus. It is a country most people don't know it's a country. They consider it part of Greece because we speak Greek, but it is a country. But my point is, when it comes to like small societies in general, they tend to be very judgmental. They expect it to be a specific way. There's little space for being different. And I was the weird kid that spent time out in nature, talking with flowers, looking up at the sky, and wondering what the meaning of life was. I was that kid. So from a very young age, I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I was an outcast. So it was ingrained within me that I had to work really hard to change myself and fit into other people's expectations of me. So when I turned 15 and I realized I was gay, I'm like, there is no way I'm going to accept that part of myself, because at the time, gay people in Cyprus were considered to be pedophiles and criminals. It was like looked down upon. So I'm like, you know what?
Mm,
I've been working hard throughout my life to change myself and be who other people wanted me to be. I'm just going to do the same. I'm going to change myself from gay to straight one step at a time. And of course,
mm,
that didn't work because I was born to be this way. But for 2 years, I entered the two most debilitating years of my life where I was trying to change who I was born to be, to the point that I reached a very low psychological point that I'm like, you know what? What is the point of living? I'm just going to take my own life. And in that
mm.
moment, that I felt everything was lost, and I had written a letter to my parents, I was ready to put an end to it, I had an epiphany. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck society, fuck the church, because I grew up Christian. I'm just going to learn to love and accept myself exactly as I am, and I'm going to find a different path. And that's how I discovered spirituality. I started with Feng Shui. I found a book about Feng Shui and I'm like, good, I'm going to use it to manifest a boyfriend. And I did. And then step by step, I got into Wicca and then witchcraft. And then I started experimenting with positive affirmations and healing and working with angels. And then, long story short, here I am, 20 years later, working with the Greek gods and goddesses. I went from Christian to pagan like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so interesting. I love that. I've heard a lot about like witchcraft and working with the Greek deities
Yeah.
in countries like Greece and, in a lot of those countries in that area. And I've heard that it's not always super easy or that witchcraft is frowned upon or illegal. Could you speak to that a little bit and maybe your experiences with that, if you have
Yeah,
any?
yeah, yeah. The church, the Orthodox Church, is very much controlling the state. And therefore, there is
Mm,
not a clear separation between the government and religion. And therefore, there's a lot of influence there. In up until 2017, it was illegal to practice Greek polytheism in Greece.
mm,
So in 2017, that was when the Greek government finally legalized Greek polytheism, which is the original religion of the ancient Greeks. And
yeah.
that's when I traveled. I was living in London at the time. I went from London to Athens and I participated in the first ever legal priesthood training. So I am like one of the first 15 priests of official priests of the religion in the modern times. The number one
Mm,
here in Cyprus because there weren't any at the time. So yeah, it's been hard. It's still hard, but you know what? We have the first modern temple of Zeus here in Cyprus right now. It's a modern temple. It's built according to the ancient standards, so it's not like a relic. It's something new, and we're trying to legalize it here in Cyprus as well. But it
Mm.
is hard. It is
Mhm.
hard for sure.
Yeah, that sounds really difficult, especially since it's like you said, like the ancient like religion, it's like the ancient way. So well I'm glad that it's coming back and you're making those strides. And so that's really great to hear. That's so cool though. Like I mean, just like me, somebody from the States, like thinking about there being this new temple that is built to Zeus is just so cool to me. Could you talk a little bit about your relationship with Zeus? I'm a Hades devotee. Like Hades is like my guy. And
Yeah.
so I'm really curious to talk to like a Zeus person because I feel like Hades and Zeus are kind of like, I almost see them as like two sides of a similar coin in a way.
Yeah, so what's really interesting, because we're bringing up the difference between the Olympian gods and the chthonic gods, the earth-based gods, because Hades is not included as part of the Olympian gods. He's not an Olympian god because he doesn't live on Olympus. But what does
Mhm.
Olympus mean and what does the underworld mean? Because that is the key distinction over here. So the 12 Olympian gods, they are 12 because they form part of a four-step formula upon which the universe is created. And this was put forth by Neoplatonic philosopher Salutius in the later Hellenistic year, early years after Christ, because when Christianity was taken over, he just put all the information of the religion in a little book, and that survived up to this day. And basically, the universe is created upon a four-step formula. Creation, let me see if I remember it. It's creation, animation, harmonization, and maintenance. And there are three gods in each step representing the beginning, the middle, and the end point of those steps. So the 12 gods essentially, they represent universal laws and functions. They are the laws upon which the universe functions, and therefore they form part of creation. Hades, on the other hand, who belongs in the underworld, he forms part of that part of the cosmos that's not fully developed yet. It's in the process of being developed. It's the shadow aspect of life. So it's where information comes from to be created and manifested. So it's a different kind of energy, needed kind of energy, but different. So
Yeah.
essentially, it's all two sides of the same coins. What my teacher always used to tell us is that we don't need to search outside of ourselves to find the gods. The gods already live here. It's just a matter of realizing that we live in the ocean of the gods and we're part of that. So when we turn within, we find that divinity within us. We find Hades within us. We find Zeus within us. We find all the gods within us.
Mm. Wow. Oh my gosh. I love that. Snaps. No, I'm obsessed. That's so cool. Yeah. And so a lot of this is covered in your book that's coming out. So this is The Secrets of Greek Mysticism. And I was lucky enough to get a copy of this and have read it. So I've read the book and I really enjoyed it. And I love, I feel like you're just so it's so unique to talk to you and to have a book like this from you because like you said you are almost like part of this new order in a way of Hellenic polytheism. And I think it's so cool to have it. So a lot of what you covered there, and so much is in the book, and yeah, and so much more. Could you tell us a little bit about what led you to write this book and sort of start talking about Hellenic polytheism as a work focus for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, essentially, I trained in 2017, and ever since that day, I've been working with the Greek gods and goddesses in my daily practice. You can see my altar right behind me, where I have like my god statues, etc. I've been reading, I've been diving into it, and then every time I would tell someone I work with the Greek gods and goddesses, I follow the old religion, they were like, "Oh, how can you honor and pray to gods that are gods of war and they fight with one another and they're jealous, like they have human traits?" People used to tell me, like, even those who were supportive of it, they were like, "Oh my God, I love Greek mythology." And while I loved hearing that, it also triggered me in a little bit because there's a big difference between Greek mythology and Greek religion slash theology slash spirituality. Mythology draws from theology, but not the other way around. However, when Christianity took over, they demonized the religion and they turned it into myths, and they only kept that part, telling people that yes, the Greeks invented democracy, they made strides in so many different areas of life, but they got religion wrong. So the truth is they didn't get religion wrong. It's just because it's been suppressed for so long that we don't know what the actual religion of the ancient Greeks is. We think of the statues and the gods as figures of mythology or just lifeless statues, but that's not it. So let's talk about the difference between Greek mythology and Greek religion. So mythology draws from theology. The myths were created by deeply spiritual people in the mystery schools who wanted to communicate deep spiritual meanings behind the gods and the formation of the universe. Of course, most people couldn't understand those meanings, those allegories. So they were understanding the myths and communicating them on a superficial level. And that's what we're doing right now. But when you look under the surface and what each color, each symbol symbolizes, then you can see what the true meaning of the gods are. So the gods, they are functions, as I said, the laws of the universe. They are the essences. For example, Aphrodite, she's the law of form. She brings things into creation. When you think of the bees pollinating flowers, when you think of the waves crashing on the beach, when you think of people having sex, the energy created there, the new form of vibration created there, that's Aphrodite's essence. Ares, the god of war, he's the most misunderstood god because he's not really the god of war. He's the god of brutal force, courage, and bravery, because sometimes the most loving thing we can do is fight. What happens when you're out and someone attacks you? Or when you see someone getting bullied and being attacked? Are you going to sit there and send them love and light? No. You're going to fight back. You're going to protect yourself. That's Ares' energy. It's the combative energy that's only needed when all other options have been exhausted. So do you see the deeper meaning behind it? That's why I wrote the book, because I wasn't seeing books out there talking about that. Even books about religion were written by people who were not practicing the religion, who were approaching it from either a mythological or historical standpoint. So what I bring into it is a spiritual standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And you have, chapters talking about the Olympian deities. And something that I thought was really unique was that perspective, was that spiritual perspective. I think you talk about virtues of the gods and things like that. And it's interesting because I know, again, Hades is not an Olympian god, but he's my guy, right? He's my god. So
I love him too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Let's talk about Hades, actually. Let's talk about Hades because
let's talk about Hades.
Yes, because he has two names. It's Pluto as well. So, and it comes from wealth. I love working with Hades, especially during the winter, because let's talk about Persephone, okay? And the myth of Persephone, who gets stolen, according to the myth, by Hades. And she has to spend 6 months in the underworld and 6 months overground. What this symbolizes on a superficial level is a change of the seasons. In the winter, Persephone is down with Hades. Demeter, her mother and the goddess of the earth, she's crying, she's searching for her daughter, and therefore the earth is barren. And then the other half of the year, Persephone comes up, Demeter is happy, and therefore the earth flourishes. At the same time, this same myth was enacted and performed during the Eleusinian mysteries. The Eleusinian mysteries were one of the most powerful ceremonies that mystics used to go through to work with Persephone, Hades, and Demeter to learn deep spiritual lessons. We know nothing about them because they were kept in secret. But and I write that in the book, what I feel this myth symbolizes is that shift between the collective unconscious, bringing things into consciousness. It's this alchemical energy of taking our fears and limiting beliefs and transforming them into something new. It's this energy of hibernation that we go through during the winter, where we're gathering up our energies, we're thinking about our dreams and desires, we're working up some magic so that we can express it. when that
Mhm.
time comes and when Persephone comes up to the earth. So what I do usually during the winter, I have an abundance altar in my house. It's actually next to me right now. And I alternate between having Hades and
Yeah.
Persephone with Hades and Demeter. So during the spring and winter months, I have Hades and Demeter to honor the seed that Hades represents, but also the flourishing that Demeter represents. And then during the winter months, I still honor abundance, the abundance of the earth that's underground, that's dormant, but not passive, that's feminine, but not passive. It's still working, it's calibrating, it's generating, it's in a gestation period, getting ready to release the magic. To
Mm.
me, that is the magic of Hades.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, and I completely resonate with that so much, and, yeah, I just I love the way that you describe it and that transition because I do think, I work with a lot of Hades devotees and Persephone devotees, and sometimes that is like a main question, is how do I practically work with and think about and utilize his archetype or his mythology or that story with Hades and Persephone? How do I, work with it on a daily basis, 365 days a year, as apart from, this winter or the equinoxes and the other times that are really important in that cycle, right? Because I think that sometimes as pagans, maybe it comes from Wicca, I'm not really sure, but I think that sometimes there's this focus on like that one Sabbath, that one day, that one moment, and then it's sort of a question mark for how you involve the deities in your daily practice. And so I think that's something that the book and just, hearing you speak about it is really helpful, um, to, consider that. What advice would you give to a um, pagan, a person who works with the Greek pantheon, as far as how to honor the gods on a daily basis?
Setting up an altar. That is my favorite way to go about it. I have an extensive chapter in the book all about setting up the altar and how the ancient Greeks did it. But it's really important. Like when we do our public ceremonies, we have a very specific way in which like the altar is set up in the same way that in Wicca, for example, you have like so many different things on it. And we have the same kind of thing. However, when it comes to the household practice, I believe it's so important to make it our own. It has to
Mm,
feel personal. An altars have been used since the beginning of time by all cultures around the world. They are portals of communication and they bridge the boundaries of the sacred and the profane. They create this
mm,
portal of communication where we can communicate with the gods. So by placing, let's say, for example, the statues or image or figurine of the god or goddess that we're working on, certain symbols that relate to them, an offering, then we can start establishing that relationship. Sometimes people ask me, like, do the gods really need our prayers and our offerings? Not really. They couldn't care less. We don't have a transactional relationship with the gods. We don't give them
mm,
something to get something back. They cannot grant us grace. The grace has been granted. The grace has been given and is given at all times. It's just a matter of are we allowing ourselves to receive it or are we holding
mm,
ourselves from receiving that support? So the altar is a way, and the offerings are a way for us to feel in communication and in communion with the gods rather than for the gods to pay attention to us because they are paying attention. So in the book, I talk about following the Greek wheel of the year. Most people are familiar with the
mm,
Celtic wheel of the year, but we have a different one. It's still aligning with the Celtic festivals, but instead of
mhm,
8, we have 12. Every month we have a different festival working with two different gods to create a balance between the masculine and the feminine energies. So by following the Greek wheel of the year through either a daily practice where you do your own thing, where you recite a hymn, and I include the Orphic hymns in the book, which are ancient Greek religious hymns translated into English, of course, or by doing a new moon and a full moon ritual, or by following the whole thing, the whole shebang, and doing like a every month a different ritual according to the festival. That's a way to
mhm,
start connecting with the gods. But I don't want people to feel stressed out in the sense that, oh
mhm.
my God, I have to do so much. Like start small, but don't think small.
Yeah.
Start with what feels good and then see what you like or what you don't, see how your schedule is, and adjust as it goes.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that. It's so exciting. And yeah, I really enjoyed reading through those. And I'm kind of familiar with a lot of the Greek festivals, but just, being somebody who works with the Greek pantheon for about 10 years. But I like the way that you broke it down in the book, and I think that it's always helpful to see what that application looks like. Because I think sometimes we can like look at historical documents and we're like, okay, again, like how do we actually translate this? So I think that you do a really great job of that. Yeah, you brought up something that I wanted to talk about. You talked about this idea that, the gods are not like they don't have this like transactional relationship with us. And this is something I hear a ton as somebody who works with a lot of pagans and, has a lot of clients who are pagans. They often come to me and they talk about this. They feel like they don't know almost like what to do with their deity relationships because they're almost viewing it from this transactional perspective. And to be honest, I feel like the way that the gods are discussed a lot in the pagan community is from that kind of transactional perspective. I don't know if you've noticed that, but I found that your book in talking about the fact that, yeah, it's like this unconditional relationship. There's still a relationship that you can build, but that love is there always. I found it really refreshing. And so what advice would you give to somebody who maybe, is kind of coming from that perspective of thinking about the relationship with the gods as transactional?
Yeah. I'm gonna go to the epilogue of the book because I share a really powerful story because I found myself in that situation. So I was finishing the book. At the same time, I was rehearsing for a Greek production of Mamma Mia. I was learning lines for my drama school exams. I was like trying to have a life and doing so many things, trying to finish the books. And I hadn't done a single ritual for 3 months. And there I was advising people to do 3 rituals every month. I'm like, who am I to teach this when I'm not doing it right now? So I felt like a complete imposter. And then while I was going through it and I was having a tantrum, I was just going through my notes, the ones that I was taking when I was training as a priest in 2017. And I saw something that my teacher said. And that was something that I mentioned in the beginning as well. You don't need to search outside of yourself to find the gods. You're already swimming in the ocean of the gods. So I read that. And in that moment, I closed my eyes. I placed a hand on my heart. And I said, I am aware. I am aware. And in that moment, I became aware of my divinity. Whatever part of my divinity chose to show up in that moment, however much of it there was there. But what's important is that in that moment, I felt the gods. And there was no transactional relationship there. I didn't have to do a ritual. I didn't have to give them libations and offerings. I didn't have to go through the whole like procession of the ritual. I didn't have to cleanse myself and prepare for anything. Of course, it's wonderful when you do that, when you have the time to do that. But it's not necessary. In the ancient times, really before the classical times, the ancient Greeks didn't even have statues. They had a piece of wood or a piece of rock, and that was the goddess or that was the god. That was their representation. It was called exoanon. Then, of course, as civilizations grew, they created the statues and the complicated processions and the rituals, etc. But we don't really need them. The gods are already there. It's like asking gravity to work for you today. Gravity, please work for me today. It's a universal law, right? So do you have a relationship with a universal law? Do you have to like have a transactional relationship with gravity? Otherwise, you're going to fly upwards? No. You just trust that gravity works. The gods, they represent laws of the universe. They just are. You just have to recognize that, open yourself up to that, and then you can remember, keyword here, remember the parts of you that you forgot. Therefore, the wisdom and the knowledge of the gods, that's not out there. It's already within us, but we just need to realize, remember by establishing that connection with the divinity.
I love that. That's awesome. It's so powerful. And I think that a lot of people can relate to feeling like you were, like feeling really busy, feeling like you're doing a lot. I find for me, action and taking actions that are sort of inspired by the gods is a really great way that I like to align my deity work practice into my mundane life. So, for example, I write, and whenever when I write like fiction, and whenever I write fiction, it's in dedication to Hades, because I find that something that he always wants me to do is to work on my art and produce things so that I can kind of like create contributions for the world and for the earth, and so that I can like leave something behind, and that kind of thing. And so anytime I write, I try to write every day. That is like my Hades time, right? And so I love what you're saying just about kind of going inwards, but that's kind of the way that I like to go inwards. It's almost like doing it through little
Yeah.
little actions. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
and I love that. And if you go to the acknowledgments of the book, I always like all three of my books are dedicated to Apollo. I start like, thank you, Apollo,
Mm.
for guiding me because I work like really closely with Apollo. So daily actions and dedicating your actions to the gods is a great way to go about it. Having like a little statue or something to symbolize the god in your workspace, wherever you are, it's a great way to connect when you just see that. But something that I include in the book, I have mantras to the gods. And
Mm.
all the mantras, they start with I or I am. And in that way, you get to bring that God's energy into your life. And in the meditations that I have, I always ask people in one of the steps to say, I am, and the name of the God. So let's say, for example, with
Mm.
Hades, you would say, I am Hades. And the
Mhm.
affirmation of I am awakens that vibration of Hades that's already within you, so you can feel it more potently. So that's another
Yeah.
great way to just bring the energy in.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's so cool. I have studied as a ceremonial magician, and that's a huge part of a lot of I'm sure a lot of ritual magic, but that's a huge part of the training that I had in ceremonial magic. Was, you want to, whether it's for practical magic or like thaumaturgical workings, like you want to, do a money ritual, step into Hades's energy, right? Or step into the energy of, another deity that represents that. And so I think that you're bringing people that idea in a really doable way where you don't have to set up, your temple for an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Although
that's
it's so
awesome.
fun when you do so.
It is, yeah. So yeah, I try to do it as often as I can. I have to be in the right mood. But I love the way that you kind of link it. Really just you just root it into something that's more grounded, and I just really like that. Um I found that I feel like I've never read a book about Hellenic polytheism like this book. And I feel like maybe part of it is because you do talk a lot about laws of the universe, and things like ascension, and things like, some topics that some people might think are sort of like more in the new age community. And so, what would you say to people who maybe aren't as familiar with those ideas? Maybe they're already pagan, or they're already a witch, and they're sort of seeing these terms in your book, and they're kind of wondering about how you utilize them in a pagan context.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up that question because I was New Age for a long period. I was a New Ager for a long period of time. At the same time, I was Christian. I went through all these different paths to come here. And the wonderful thing about that is that I understand all worlds and I can communicate to a specific audience. Traditionally, my audience has been New Age, and therefore I had to bridge the New Age into the pagan community as well and just
Mm.
walk on both paths. But here's a fascinating thing. When I was studying like Greek paganism and I was going to the ancient Greek texts and I was reading them and understanding the different philosophical schools, I was shocked to find out that a lot of the beliefs, the New Age, quote unquote, New Age beliefs that I had were really, 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 really old age. I was finding certain of those beliefs in the ancient texts. I'm like, oh, okay. So it wasn't just like this fad that I was following. It was real. It was what the ancient Greeks were actually believing. Now, what's really going to shift people's perspective here is the difference between religion and philosophy. According to the ancient Greeks, they had a common religion where everybody belonged to, like the pagan religion, okay? And then they have the philosophical schools, which were different to that, but also connected to it. Here's how. Religion had to do with producing virtuous people from the moment of their birth until the moment of their death. What happened before birth or after death was not of interest of the
Mm.
religion. It was not something the religion dealt with. Who dealt with that were the philosophers, the philosophical schools. We have the Stoics, we have the Platonists, the Aristotelianists, we have the Orphics, we have the Pythagoreans, like all these different types of philosophical schools. So people belong to the religion, but they also belong to a different philosophical school. The Stoics did not believe in reincarnation. You die, poof, you're gone. The Pythagoreans or the Orphics believed in reincarnation. They
Mm.
believed in the ascension of the souls. The Orphics believe that the gods used to be humans that
Mm.
evolved from being human to being a daemon to being a hero to being a daemon to being a minor deity and then to being an Olympian deity, and then you keep on ascending. So that is part of the philosophical school of the Orphics. Today we think about ascension like, oh, that's New Age. It's not New Age, it's Orphic philosophy. It's something that
Yeah.
happened really, 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 really like in the old times. It's not something
Mm.
new. So my perspective that I bring into the book, of course, I bring the framework, the basic framework of the religion, but also I'm an Orphic. I'm not a
Mm.
Stoic, although I love the Stoics. So I bring the perspective of the ascension of the soul, and we evolve from being humans to being heroes to being daemons to being deities eventually. So that is how I would bridge it. You can be a pagan and not believe in ascension and reincarnation or whatever it is that the New Age community is talking about. It's just a different philosophical school, and you belong in a different philosophical school. It's as simple as that.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I've been really interested in like the Orphic way and in
Orphism,
the
yeah.
yeah, Orphism. Yeah. I've been really interested in that because I think that they talk a lot about the underworld and I'm like always trying to, learn more about the underworld. And so when it comes to like ancient texts and philosophies that have resonated with me as like a chthonic practitioner, sorry, I feel like I can't even
Orphism.
speak today.
It's not an easy word. Orphism. Try
Orphism.
saying Pythagoreanism.
Yes,
Even worse.
that's so funny. I just think of, I'm thinking I almost said Orpheism.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, no, it's something that really has resonated with me always. And maybe I've always thought it more from the perspective of, illuminating parts of the underworld. But I know that a big goal for them was to enter the underworld and find certain places, certain locations where they could receive that knowledge, that hidden knowledge that kind of almost like, yeah, like you said, like ascends or opens their consciousness up to the level of a divine being. And so it is really fascinating. And I do think that people, like some people who are pagan, wouldn't expect to see that in such an ancient worldview, but it's
It's
there.
there.
So,
It's there
yeah.
for sure. Yeah. And I was also surprised to find out about that. I'm like, good. I was reading about law of attraction, for example. It's one of the 7 laws of the universe that the Hermetic philosophical school was all about. They talk about the
Mm.
law of vibration. I'm like, oh, I was reading about it. I'm like, hold on a second. I'm like, that's the law of attraction. It's just packaged in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Kabbalion and
Yeah.
the Hermetic text. Yeah. It's so cool. I love that. So could you talk a little bit about what your day-to-day life is as a priest of Zeus? You're a priest of Zeus, is that correct?
Not really. We're not a priest of a specific god. The
Okay.
idea is you follow all the gods, but you
Oh,
have a
okay.
guardian god or goddess.
Oh, I see.
So my garden god is Apollo, but I also work
Oh.
closely with Aphrodite. But
Okay.
the whole idea is working with all 12 gods and more so that there is balance in the year and you embrace the qualities and the virtues of each god. So each god was assigned by the modern pagans 2 virtues that align with the energies. And the idea is you honor and you practice that virtue of the god every single month. And therefore, throughout the year, you practice like 24 virtues.
I see. Okay.
But the kind of god that I love to honor most is Apollo and Aphrodite. And Apollo is my garden god because of all the ways that we're similar, essentially. He's a masochist like I am. He's into so many
Mm.
things. Like when you look at him philosophically, he's into music and he's into like singing, and he's a god of divination and energy protection and just so many things. So I would say him.
Yeah. Him. Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. I love that. That's so cool. Yeah. And I love just the way that you know, again, you're working with the virtues. And I just think that that's so important. And you go through in the book and talk about the virtues of each deity. Sorry, my like computer
Uh,
is being so
don't worry,
weird right now.
I'm hearing something as well. I'm like, what's happening?
I
I'm
don't
like,
know. Salem craziness.
I would say that's Hades. He's saying hi. He's like, hey,
Oh, wait. I can't even hear.
you've been invoking me, so here I am, showing up.
What is happening?
You should totally keep
Sorry,
this
I'm
in.
like,
It's Hades interfering, people. Live, giving you live performance.
could you tell us a little bit about your relationships with your deities that you work with and sort of how that works for you being a Hellenic polytheist?
Yes. So essentially, us like Greek pagans, we follow the Greek wheel of the year. And the way this is divided, every single month there's a different celebration, a different festival around two gods, the god of the month and the male or female counterpart. So right now, while we're recording this episode, we are in March. So we're celebrating the Asclepiad, which is in honor of Asclepius. And at the same time, the spring equinox. So you see there's this alignment with the Celtic wheel of the year as well. And the gods of the month are Athena and Hephaestus. And specifically, Athena is the goddess of the month, and the virtues are fortitude and quickness of mind. So instead of having a god or a goddess that we're a priest to, we're a priest to all the gods. And every month we celebrate two gods. The whole aim is to practice the virtues of that god and really bring them into our lives and create this cyclical relationship with the earth. However, we all have a garden god or goddess. My garden god is Apollo because of the similarities that I have with him, and because I feel that he's been guiding me throughout this life and throughout my previous lives as well. So our garden god is there with us because he holds the vibrational frequency or the energy that we need to fulfill our purpose in this lifetime. And actually, when people get the book, I have a free workshop all about meeting your garden god or goddess. When you go to GreekMysticism.com and you enter the order number of the book, you get access to that workshop. But I also included in the book, there's a meditation all about meeting your garden god. At the same time, you can have other garden gods that come in and support you at different times of your life. For example, your garden god, it's obviously Hades, but you may choose to work with other gods or goddesses as well, depending on what it is you're working on. For a long period of time, I worked with Aphrodite because according to the myth, she was born here in Cyprus. We have Aphrodite's rock, the beach where she was born, the biggest cult of Aphrodite was here. So I worked a lot with Aphrodite to embrace my sexuality, to forgive myself, to learn to love myself and my body. So gods come and go when it comes to like working with you more intensely, but we all have this one god or goddess that resonates most.
I love that. Yes, that's awesome. And I love that you talk about it in terms of like the guardianship being the kind of distinction there, right? This god that you feel like you connect with or the energy matches, or I like also what you said about the fact that maybe you need them sort of like as a guiding person or as a guiding force in your life. And that's definitely how I've um felt with Hades, where I very much felt like, maybe there's maybe it's not obvious of like why I would work with Hades or why I would choose to work with him. I think a lot of people sometimes ask me, why don't you have a larger relationship with like a feminine deity or a goddess? And I have Persephone, but my relationship in my like you said, like my guardian god is much more Hades, and it's always kind of been skewed towards him. And I always describe it as like the reason why I work with him and the reason why I feel like he is so important to me is because I almost need his energy because I don't have it. And like there's something that's similar about us, but it's almost like he kind of fills in gaps for me. And that's really satisfying to me in a spiritual setting. And I feel like that initiation that he brings, maybe similarly to how he was able to, make Persephone the queen of the underworld, that's kind of the energy that I feel from him. And so it really resonates with me when you talk about the guardian deity.
Yeah, and I love what you talk about Persephone. A quote came into my mind that I think really captures the essence of Persephone and how we work with the gods. And what you're going through right now with Hades, like for you personally, Aphrodite is both the queen of the underworld and the king and the queen of springtime. So she's
Mm.
both. She can embrace both qualities. And for example, you saw that in Hades. I'm like, okay, there's something in there that's similar with me, but there's also something that I need. So by calling that in, I can step into this bigger version of myself. Same thing with like anything we want to accomplish in life, we can work with the gods in that way as a way of manifesting as well. Because I talk about in the book, I have a new moon ritual and a full moon ritual, which are based on the ancient Greek rituals, but I supplemented with like my own content as well, where we can work with the gods in a theosophical way of calling in their energy and claiming that. Let's say, for example, I want to embrace my sexuality more. I'm going to work more with Aphrodite and be like, you know what? I am Aphrodite. What I love about Aphrodite, and right now I have two podcasts. One is a spiritual podcast, the Lit Up Light Worker, and I have a gay sex and relationships podcast, which is a very explicit gay sex stories, but also bringing in sexual, like spirituality and psychology. I couldn't have done that podcast if it weren't for Aphrodite helping me
Mm.
embrace all types of love. Because what the New Age community and Christianity has programmed us into thinking is that love is just this spiritual kind of love, and it's like agape, and it's this oneness, this state of oneness with everyone. And it is, okay, it is a part of Aphrodite. Aphrodite had different epithets. One of her epithets, specifically the one talking about agape and oneness, is the Urania Aphrodite, which basically means
Mm.
heavenly Aphrodite. But there's also Philomedes Aphrodite, who belongs to the people, Pandemos Aphrodite, who also belongs to the people. There is like Aphrodite Python, which is all about flirting and being sensual. So she
Mhm.
embraces orgies and she embraces divine love in the same level. There is no judgment. Here in Cyprus, women would go to Aphrodite's temple and offer their bodies to the goddess and practice sacred prostitution as a way of
Mm.
offering their service to the goddess. During the Aphrodisia festival, they would celebrate sex and fertility by baking like phallic shaped bread and handing it over to people. In the Dionysian mysteries, for example, there were orgies as well. So
Yeah.
I embraced that aspect of myself by working with all phases of Aphrodite, not just the part that's about beauty. And all about connecting with divine love and feeling high, unlike angels. No, it's about bringing all aspects of it. And that's why I love Hades as well, because he's all about embracing the darker side and realizing, you know what, the darker side we shouldn't hide from it. There
Mm.
is like all good things come from the darkness because that's where desires are born, and then we can take them and bring them into the light or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh,
Thank you for
I love
listening to
it.
my TED talk.
Yes, no, I say, hey, that's what we're here for. I love it. Yeah, and I think that it is really important to know about the epithets, the different epithets of the deities that you're working with, because that is such a instantly um deeper level that you can go with them in a way because you can really see how they show up in the different lessons that they're able to teach. So yeah, it sounds like Aphrodite, all of those lessons you were able to really learn from Aphrodite. Other than Aphrodite and Apollo, are there any other virtues of the gods, as you talk about in your book, that you've felt really personally affected by or that have taught you a deep lesson?
Any specific virtues of the gods, you said, or any god specifically?
Virtues or the god specifically, like any lessons that you feel like you were able to really learn and integrate.
Yes. Like one of my other favorite gods to work with is Hermes
Mm.
or Mercury, the Roman Mercury. Now, Apollo created the caduceus according to the myth, but then he gave it as a gift to Hermes. So the caduceus is a sacred symbol that I feel is so powerful. It's a symbol for ascension and enlightenment. So for those of you who don't know what the caduceus is, it's very easy to picture it right now because you've seen it 100 of times. So think about the symbol of medicine, okay, which is not the caduceus, but most people think it's the caduceus, and sometimes they use it. They use the caduceus instead of. The symbol of medicine is a rod with a snake wrapped around it. That's actually the rod of Asclepius, the Greek god of
Mm.
medicine. Now, the caduceus is similar but different. It's also a rod, a golden rod, with two interlocking snakes, and they interlock in 7 different places, and then wings on top. Okay, now everybody knows this symbol. It's like a very common symbol.
Yeah.
What does it symbolize? Why 7 points interlocking? Because of the 7 chakras. Of course, the
Mm.
ancient Greeks didn't know the word chakra, but they talked about these energetic points through the body. They talked about the 7 laws of the universe. Number 7 is very important in many spiritual traditions, including the Greek one. So they recognize that we have this energy rising up through our body. And therefore, the golden rod is the body and the energy rising up. And when the energy goes all the way up to the crown chakra that we know as the crown chakra, we have the wings. And therefore, we reach enlightenment. We open up. So Hermes is a god of communication. He's a god of merchants. That's how like the superficial way of talking about it. But what does that mean? He's a god of pathways. He's a god of leading us somewhere. He's the god of guiding us, yes, in life, but also spiritually to ascend. So what I love doing with Hermes, first of all, because I'm into pottery, I created the caduceus. Wait, in my pot. Let me show you. I think you're going
Oh
to
my
love that.
gosh. Yes.
Here's a caduceus that I made in my pottery class, and of course it's holographic because look at me.
Yes.
And and here's the rod of Asclepius that I also created because why not? Okay, so I use this symbol, and you don't need to go and sign into pottery classes to create it, but you can visualize the symbol, you can draw the symbol, you can print the symbol. And just by placing it, I do this in my spiritual practice, I just place it here. And I ask Hermes to activate the symbol and imprint the energy within my body. And instantly it
Mm.
balances all my chakras and it connects me to source. And instantly I know guidance and I receive the vibration. Or when I want to work with Asclepius, like this month that we're honoring the Asclepia, you bet I'm going to use my Asclepius rod to activate the energy of healing within me and go through that. So there are
Yeah.
many lessons the gods can give to you. I didn't know this. Nobody taught me this. I was inspired to do this as a result of my connection and work with the gods. So I think it's really important for people to give space and time for the gods to inspire unique practices and wisdom through them.
Amazing. I love that. That's awesome. So where can people find you and your Instagram handle? Your book is called The Secrets of Greek Mysticism. But where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at George Lizos. My website is georgelizos.com. And when you get the book and you go to greekmysticism.com, you also get the free workshop with me all about meeting your garden god or goddess.
Awesome. Yes. And I'm sure a lot of people will want to take advantage of that because I feel like so many people I always hear like from my audience, like, I want to get to know my deities or I want to learn who my guardian is or my patron is or my matron or something. So definitely get the book and go and get that workshop. That sounds so exciting. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Diaries of a Witch podcast and to chat all about your practice and your book. I feel like you have so much wisdom and the way that you talk about your work is so inspiring to me. So thank you so much for coming on.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
Yay. Awesome. Bye, everybody.